And as I said, today I'm going to be talking about the 8 limbs of yoga. So you can look it up. Now I'm going to put all the class notes in our YouTube recording, our Facebook recording, as well as our Patreon. All right, so you can reference to it. But before I talk about the 8 limbs of yoga as the beginning of practice, as the foundation of our practice, and I want to kind of remind ourselves what we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks since our last election. So first I talk about the 5 skandhas. Because all along, in the beginning of this class, when I started doing this about 4 years ago, I always said that even though I talk about chi therapy, I practice chi as a journey, not a destination. The destination is all about the liberation or the emancipation of a mind, correct? And so it would be like saying, Denny, I hear you know how to invest. Maybe you should invest for me. I said, oh, that's fine. I said, so I hope, so I said, where do you put your money right now? And he says, I don't know. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. I don't know where my monies are. So how do you expect me to invest for you? In other words, if we're talking about liberation of the mind, emancipation of the mind, first we got to figure out where is our mind. And then first, before even that, is we got to figure out what is our mind made up of. What are the dimensions of existence? So I talk about the 5 skandhas. I talk about the first one being the form, which is everything that is physical about us and the surrounding. It's really like a funnel, taking the physics through our physiology. The eye sees the light, the nose sees the smell, and the taste, and the ear, and the touch, like that, right? Okay, so that's the first skandha. It's taking the physics through the physiology. The second skandha is called the sensation. It's taking using the physiology to generate a neural signal. So that's the neurology. That's all about the spine. That's all about sensation, feeling it without judging. And that's the key to our practice, by the way. But in any case, our body continues. All the nerve ending goes into our spine, and then eventually it is centralized, and then it delivers to our brain. Right? Our brain is a thinking mind. Our thinking mind is an intellect, but it's a small part of our intellectual system. And that's a problem, is that we don't understand beyond the intellect. There's a lot more intelligence in this body, not just in the spine, but all through our body. There's a lot of intelligence in that, but we tend to ignore that. And so part of our practice is to go back to that and just let go of the intellect a little bit. But in any case, it goes from sensation to perception. That's when we start to perceive things, right? So when you put a piece of chocolate bar in front of me, or a chocolate ice cream, all I see is brown. I don't know how to judge whether I like it or not. But then when it gets to the brain, the intellect, we start judging. We start to say, oh, I like this, I don't like this. All right? So that's called the perception. And from the brain, we generate a thought. That's called the volition. Now the volition breaks down into what I call the virtuous mental state versus the non-virtuous mental state, right? And it goes beyond that, called consciousness. But we're not going to talk about that today. We've already talked about it a little bit, and we'll come back to that in the future anyway. This has been a busy month for my wife and I, right? So we started with 2 dogs that we have to dog sit for our needs. One is a big German Shepherd. One is a tiny little mutt. So every time I walk them, I have to walk both of them, right? Big, right? And so the neighbors sees that, and they see this cute little puppy, and they wanted to see if he's friendly. And I said, no, it's not my dog. And by the way, this is the aggressor. The little one is the aggressor. The big one is the protector. Walking with the big German Shepherd is like driving with a Humphrey. Everybody stays away. Anyway, the point is, if you think about our mental states, and there are 51 of them, 51 mental factors, you can easily divide it into an aggressive part and a protective part, in a way, right? Or one is called non-virtuous and one is called virtuous. So I talk about that. And the non-virtuous parts, is the fear, is the anger, is the violence and all that. And so you know what I'm getting at, right? So our past election is all about focusing on the fear and the hate, because it's part of us. We're all capable of that. But they want to make that into a common language. It's the common currency now. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going to go for a long, long time, and that's very sad. But in any case, let's just study that some more, and then we said, okay, now if you take all the non-virtuous mental factor, they group into something called the 5 skandhas. The 5 hindrances. And the reason why I call it hindrances is because we don't think about the virtuous versus the non-virtuous as the angel and the devil on the shoulder, that they're co-equal. What we think about is that the virtuous is the real inside of us. It's the sun, it's the warmth, it's the Holy Spirit. Whereas the non-virtuous is the black cloud that is covering that, so we can't even see it most of the time, right? So that black cloud is called hindrances. It hinders us from seeing the true self. And the 5 hindrances come back to basically attachment, aversion, right? One is I see something I like, I want to see more. I don't understand why it's going away. The other one is aversion. When I see something I don't like, I'm pushing away. I become very negative, very violent even, right? So that kind of explains the campaign. The campaign is now becoming a campaign of grievance, right? Make America Great Again is going back to the time when a white male has representation in the government. This is where it was when I first came to the country, but now it's not the case. It's not the case, right? The country is represented equally by women, people of color, people with college educations, people with different preferences, and so that makes it very uneven for the traditional people, and it becomes a campaign of grievance. They're focusing now on the 5 hindrances. That becomes the common language. So we need to understand that. So beyond that is depression, anxiety, and then also doubt, loss of faith. Loss of faith in the government. Loss of faith in government, throwing it all away with the bathwater, right? So once upon a time, people, before the election, people said, well, be careful, we'll be walking, sleepwalking into a dictatorship. Well, no, we didn't sleepwalk. We march into a dictatorship because they have no faith. We have no faith. How can we have a faith in a government that doesn't even represent us? I'm talking from the working poor, the people who can't make ends meet, the people who are overtaxed because of inflation. Inflation is a tax, right? Anyway, so we talk about 5 hindrances, and so now the question is that how do we overcome that? How do we overcome that? I really believe that we are like living in a matrix right now. That the matrix where the common language is hate and violence, and we're trying to escape the matrix by believing that that our inner self is the key to a light. So now the question is, this comes to today's presentation, is how do we get away from that? How do we maintain that spiritual health, right? How do we not let all the negativity affects our health? Because it affects our health, right? So we talk about the 5 elements, right? We talk about the water, which is the beginning of life. If no water, no life, right? And we talk about the vegetation, which is a very basic form of life. You got to have see some algae, right? Then we talk about the next one, which is the fire. The fire is the sun. The sun comes through because the algae start to change the atmosphere. The sun comes through and start to warm up the soil, then because the soil becomes capable of both transport and transportation, like waters and mineral, and then the mineral adds back into the water. So we talk about the balance of that, the harmony of that, which is the life, which is health. So when you think about having all those hate out there, having all those violence out there, you got to be careful. You got to say, hey, I got to protect myself, because if I become hateful, That's a fire element. What promotes fire? Wood, vegetation. What is the wood element in the body? That's a liver. Have you noticed that people who are very angry tend to have liver cancer? So you say, well, I'm not hateful, but I'm very sad. I'm very sad with what's going on. I am very sad with what's going on. I'm 68 years old. I've been here for 53 years. I haven't stopped contributing to this society. First as a student, then as a professor, then as an entrepreneur. I want to earn my place in this society, this shining city on the hill. I want to be part of that. I just want to earn it. And it's completely broken in front of me. I am so sad. But what is sad element? Sad is water. What promotes water? Mineral. What is the mineral? Mineral is the lung. There's a epidemic of people with lung cancer that have never smoked because of sadness. And the list goes on. So we gotta not only protect mentally, we gotta protect our body. So how do we do that? Well, here's our practice. Now, people think that Buddha is some mythical element. He's not. He's a real person. He was a prince. He was a North Indian living where it is now Nepal. And he decided to start his spiritual journey as a yogi. So people don't understand that. So when we talk about practice, let's start with the yoga practice. And you say, oh, yoga, I know that. That's where I wear my leotards and I do my... No, I'm not putting that. I'm not saying that. That's not good. That's just one branch, one limb of the 8 limbs of yoga. So let's just examine what is the 8 limbs of yoga, and then we should stop pretty soon. I don't want to make this. So the 8 limbs of yoga, think about it as a wheel with 8 spokes. They're all co-equal. Now let's talk about the one that we know. The one that we know is called Asana. That's the posture. That's the posture. Now there's more than what we practice in the United States. What we actually practice in the United States is called hatha yoga, forceful yoga. Okay? There are other ways to practice asana. But asana is important. It's the practice of the body. We just did something called the Pana Yama. Pana is breathing, but particularly breathing with your stomach. Yama is the practice. It's the practice of your breathing. Okay? That is important. That's another branch of yoga. And then there is another one called sense withdrawal. Sense withdrawal means that you have your 6 senses. You have your eye, your ear, your nose, your tongue, your body, and so forth. Now, the Chinese, they don't just call it senses. They call it sense door. It's a door. It's a gate. And what's inside, what's outside. What's outside is the physics, is the light, is all that. And our job is not to withdraw from it, but to protect ourselves from it. In other words, we're like the dogs guarding a household. When a suspicious person comes around, you say, whoa, just make sure that, oh, I know you, I see you, I feel you. But as long as that person doesn't enter the household, you let it go. Right? You don't chase after the person, because if you chase after the person, then the door is wide open. So that's what we would call mindfulness, and in traditional Indian, it's called Pratyahara. Okay, it's sense withdrawal. So that's another one. So it's really about the body, the breath, and at least in this case, is the mind. It's the mindfulness. It's always remember, where is your mind. You anchor your mind on your body. You anchor your mind on your breath, just to guard yourself from the disturbance and outside. Now that's 3 of them. But actually there's some prerequisites for these 3, which in the Western world doesn't quite practice because they become morality. In the Western world, we don't separate morality from religion. And so you don't preach morality, right? Because it intrudes into someone's space. But morality doesn't need to be religion. Morality is just how you conduct yourself. And so the first two limbs of the yoga is very important. The first one is called Yama. Back to Yama again, right? It's just practice. It's your morality. It's the discipline. It's your restraint. In other words, it's all the things that you do to protect others. There's another one called Niyama. Niyama, which is kind of the companion of Yama. Yama is to protect others. Niyama is how to protect yourself from the non-virtuous mental factors. Right? The simplest one of that is, you know how the Boy Scouts, they have to do one good deed a day? That is Nyama. Is how to have virtuous thoughts. So the list goes on, and it goes on to the next one. It's worth repeating. It's called Dharana, which is one dialect. In another dialect, it's called Jhana. Jhana. And jhana is translated into concentration or samatha, but the best translation of that is called Zen. It's the sentimentation of your non-virtuous thoughts. We're fully capable of virtuous and non-virtuous. It's like a glass of water is full of mud. The way that we can cleanse ourselves of the non-virtuous thought is to let it settle. So this word jhana, when it came to China, it becomes chana, and then later on it shortened into chan, and then when in Japan it became zen. It's a sentimentation, right? It's a sentimentation. And then finally it gets a little deeper into called samadhi, one-point concentration, where I said, you start to lose track of time, you start to lose track of your own breathing, you become one with your mind. Okay, so today I'm just going to talk about that as just to remind ourselves that even though we're studying Buddhist teaching, Buddha himself was a yogi. A lot of what he does is the traditional yogic practice, and the yoga practice is the 8 limbs of yoga. A lot of similarity. Now, of course, Buddha himself have a lot of contribution that didn't exist. Just like Jesus had a lot of contribution that didn't exist in the traditional Judea society, right? And we'll talk about that. And just say that a big contribution is what we call vipassana, contemplation. Contemplation, how to feel it without judging. That was the key, all right?